All right, Joe. You can just face me this way.
Yeah.
You don't have to look into the camera. All right. Mr. Jeff Porcaro, we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Yeah, we should talk about Jeff. I think, and it has a lot to do with Jeffrey's playing. His groove and his concept of playing rock. He could play jazz too. A lot of people don't know this, but there were some situations where he had to play jazz, like on a Stan Getz album. He did Herb Alpert produced Stan Getz. It's called Appassionato, and it was very little rock on it. It was mostly jazz waltz, samba rock,
Right.
kind of thing, which had a nice groove to it. But anyways, I think when Jeff was very young, growing up, we lived in a 3-room flat back in Connecticut. And of course, me being a drummer, beside being a percussionist, but my first instrument, of course, was drum set.
Right.
And I was one of the so-called jazz players in Hartford, And I had one of the best gigs. I had a steady gig at the High Blind Hotel, 5 nights a week. And they would bring in, piano players. It was piano trios. But on Monday nights, they would bring artists like Zoot Sims, Al Cohen, some great, beboppers. So I got a chance, Freddie Hubbard, Donald Byrd, so I got a chance to play with some real nice people. But anyways, around the house, I'm always playing Miles Davis albums, Max Roach albums. But I remember as a kid, Jeff, in his crib, he was in his crib, and I'm playing, my wife and I are listening to Miles Davis and Bag's Groove and Miles' solo. He could sing his solo. Ba ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba da da. He used to sing it note for note, that little squirt, and in tune too.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's kind of how I got the feeling. Wow, he's singing Miles' solo.
Yeah.
And, rhythmically, he's not missing a beat. So I kind of got the feeling that, wow, he's going to be a drummer. And then the other thing that really, it was funny because, we had this linoleum floor, and he would grab my drumsticks and he'd be tapping away on the floor, And the guy downstairs used to get pissed off. In those days, the water pipes, they come right through the floor, right along your walls, And the guy's whacking on the pipes, like, to stop the noise, I say, Jeff, I'd have to go get the sticks from him, because he was bugging the guy.
Right on.
So, and then, I used to take him with me to symphony rehearsals. I was in the Hartford Symphony then, So I could tell he loved music. He couldn't wait to come to the children's concerts, Once a month we had a children's concert. We play Peter and the Wolf and, some great, legit music. And then, of course, for the longest time, he never even... The only thing he had as far as a drum set, because I didn't have a drum set at home then. I used to teach at Al Lepak's drum shop. So,
Good old Al.
I used to kind of mind the shop while Al was teaching at the University of Hartford. So I could practice there, because we lived on Charles Street, and there's no way to set up a set of drums and practice there. No way. Practice pad, yeah, but no drum set. But then we moved to a housing project, and we got a Remo practice set. Remo came out with a practice set way back then, and I got him one, And Jeff and Mike and Steve, they cut out with cardboard. Mike cut out a Fender bass. The Beatles were coming around then,
Yeah.
and the kids were making believe they were, put on a Beatle record, and there they go, Jeff on a rubber practice set.
Yeah.
But and they even won a contest at school.
Yeah.
They did something, one of the Beatle tunes, you know, and so then at that time we moved to California. And Jeff still, it was just starting to, when we moved to Bose Park, I did have a set of drums set up in a, you know, we had our own cellar there. And Jeff finally was getting at the drums, you know, a drum set, a real drum set. And I remember that's how he developed his bass drum technique too, because he couldn't reach the foot pedals, you know, sitting normally. So he had to play the bass drum with heel up, you know, with his toe. So that's why if you ever saw Jeff play his bass drum technique, he kind of plays with his heel ups, sliding up and down the pedal. You know, yeah, and that's how, you know, you grow up doing that, and that's how you play, you know. Then we moved to L.A., you know, Jeff helped me. We rented a house in Burbank, and we, you know, muffled. We got some old rugs, blankets, and put them up against the wall. And Jeff met some musicians in Burbank, and they started rehearsing in our garage. And I said, wow, you know, I'm listening to them play, and I'm saying, uh-oh, you know, watch out here, you know.
Yeah.
And then, as things would be, we moved over to Studio City, and I got the Glenn Campbell show then. But I was doing some work. I got busy with a contractor named Jules Chaikin, and in Studio City where we live, right down the street was a park, Studio City Park it's called. And one year there was a Halloween dance going on, and you know, the directors of the park knew Jeff because he hung there, you know. And they knew he played drums, you know. So they said, geez, put together a band, you know, play for our Halloween party. So Jeff and Mike, Steve Lukather, you know, guys that were going to, he was in North Hollywood High at this time, freshman. Anyways, this contractor, Jules Chaikin, took his son to the Halloween dance. In fact, now don't forget, I've been working for this guy, playing percussion for him. Right. You know, I did the Russian circus for him, all that. You know,
circus.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was one of my first gigs, man.
When you first came here?
Yeah.
Oh,
when I first came to LA at the Forum. I did the Russian circus, man.
I probably saw you, Joe. I didn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a bitch, man. That was a bitch. In fact, when they got done here, just to sidetrack a quick,
sure.
The conductor came up to me and said, "Drummer, Anaheim." They were going to Anaheim. And I said, "Fuck you," right out loud, because, you know, the Kazowskis, you know, coming with the horses, catch me when I do this and do that. Guys up on the trapeze, catch me, you know, blow the horn here, hit the whip here, you know. And they drove me crazy. But I knew the book, you know, after a couple of nights I knew the book. But I didn't want to go to Anaheim because the John Birch Society was giving, you know, when they heard the Russian circus was coming, they were going to give them a hard time. And they did. They put a smoke bomb in the bleachers.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard about that. Remember that? Yeah.
Wow, that's a wild story.
Yeah. So anyways, but I'm working for Jules, right? So I go to work for him one day. I'm doing the gig for him at the Greek Theater.
Right.
And he came up to me at rehearsal. He goes, "Why didn't you tell me you had a son that plays drums?" I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, "I heard your son at Studio City Park last night, and he's a bitch. He's a hell of a rock and roll drummer. Why didn't you tell me?" I says, "Well, you know, I don't go around bragging. You know, I'm kind of quiet guy. You know." He says, "Man, I'm gonna spread the word about that kid. He's a bitch." So, sure enough, Jules calls, you know, and Jules says, I went up to him. So, "What's your name?" And he said, "Jeff Porcaro." He says, "Joe Porcaro, your dad?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I live right down the street." He goes, "Oh my God, Joe, you know, never told me about you." Well, anyways, at that time, Jack Doherty, who was the producers for the Carpenters, Remember Karen Carpenter, the
do,
girl
yes, I
drummer,
do
and her
remember.
brother, you know. They, their producer at A&M Records, he had his own, he had like the studio locked in there. Like the Carpenters did all their recordings there. His name was Jack Doherty. He was a great producer for the Carpenters. Well, he's a great arranger, great, big band arranger and writer. And beside being a, great producer. Well, every Saturday, he had a rehearsal band at A&M Records every Saturday. And Jules would, was his contractor, and he would get the guys in town for him. And of course, Jules would get all the big studio guys. And the studio guys, some of the greatest, were there
Yeah.
because they wanted to keep their chops up.
At the rehearsal band.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you got Johnny Ordino, Max Bennett, Ray Brown. Every week it was a different rhythm section. And they were looking, and the drummer was Hal Blaine, one of the top studio drummers, Well, Hal was starting to get real busy, even on weekends. So Jack told, Jules, find me a drummer that's not that busy, man. It doesn't have to be a studio guy. So Jules told him about Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, he's in high school. Does he read? Can he read? I mean, we can't have a kid come here, because it wasn't all big band jazz. It was like, rockish jazz, Well, Jules calls me up and says, what do you think? I could even get you the charts, You think he could do it? I said, well, he did play at the Hollywood Bowl for the, in those days they had the Battle of the Bands.
Right.
Remember at the Hollywood Bowl?
Yes.
And the band that Jeff went and, tried out for, participated in, they didn't make it.
Yeah.
They didn't make it.
Yeah.
And Lukather was in it. Even David Page was in it,
Oh,
too.
wow.
And they didn't make it. So anyways, but the director noticed Jeff, and they picked him. See, all the bands that failed, they had to have a stage band to play for the dancers,
Oh, I see.
dance routines, and singers.
Right.
And then somebody like Henry Mancini or Lalo Schifrin would come in and conduct the band. Well, they picked Jeff to be the drummer.
Oh, wow.
And out of the nucleus of all the other groups, they formed a big band.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob McDonald from SC, he was one of the judges picking the guys. Well, they picked Jeff, and I had to take him to L.A. City College
Right.
for rehearsals. Tom Scott was there, all these great musicians. Well, anyways, he auditioned, and he auditioned with flying colors,
Nailed it.
And I knew, he read pretty decent at that time. He was a pretty good little reader. He didn't have much big band experience,
Right.
but, none at all. But, he had ears,
Sure.
So Bob chose him, and he did the Battle of the Bands. He did the big band part.
He was the house band.
Yeah, with the house band. So
Got
I'm
it.
sidestepping a little bit.
That's cool.
So in the audience, there were the judges to pick the best singer, best dancers, and best groups. Well, Claire Fisher,
Right.
Lalo Schifrin, Henry Mancini, some of the big guys in town. So anyways, when it was over and they presented the prizes, they said, we're presenting a new prize this year. It's never been done before. We're giving the prize out to the most outstanding musician. And it was Jeff.
Oh, wow.
They freaked over his playing.
Wow.
Because at the end, they did a gospel thing with the choir from the Baptist Church in South LA.
Right.
They did a big, don't bat, was bashing and screaming, and there's Jeff up there wailing away, man. And they gave him the Outstanding Musician Award. I was so proud of that, man, because, I'm there, and I'm, I never worked with Mancini at Lalo. I was still new in town,
You're right.
So anyways, getting back to Jules, so he asks us, tells me, I said, well, he did this thing at the bowl, maybe he can do it. I said, why don't you, ask him. I don't want to force him, but
Sure.
have him come to a rehearsal. Well, he was going to high school at that time. He wasn't at Grant. He was at North Hollywood High.
Yeah, so I went there.
And he met Kelly Shanahan.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Kelly is Dick Shanahan's son. And what a lot of guys don't know is that Kelly showed Jeff a lot of stuff, a lot of technical stuff. Because, his dad was a great drummer, Dick
Right.
Shanahan. And, Kelly learned a lot of his stuff from his dad, and Jeff used to hang with him. They became very tight. And then later on in life, Jeff was Kelly's daughter's godfather.
Oh.
They were that tight. So anyways, Jeff started panicking. So he asks Kelly to come with him to the rehearsal. They go to A&M Records on a Saturday. So Joe says, okay, come on, you got to play. He walks in, got drums set up for him, everything. And who's there? Jim Keltner also, right? They asked Jim Keltner to come. Well, at that time, Bonnie and Delaney, there was an album, a hit album, and Keltner was one of Jeff's, favorite drummers. Jeff used to freak over Keltner.
Right.
And there's Keltner in the same studio with him. He's freaking out. So when Jules came over to him, he said, well, I brought Kelly, my friend Kelly. He's a good reader. Maybe you should hear him first. And Jules says, no, I told them about you. They want to hear you play, So he did it. They loved him.
Wow.
Jack loved him. He loved, he made a few mistakes, but they loved
Sure.
his energy, And that's where he met Keltner. Well, Keltner played after, and Jack decided to use double drums.
Oh, wow.
So the album came out. It's called Class of 1976, I think it's called, or 1973, because I think it was 1973,
Right.
right?
Right.
Well, the album comes out, and there's like about 3 or 4 pages of pictures of the studio musicians that are playing on that album. Gene Sipp, all the top Hollywood guys,
Right.
Well, the album comes out, but the main thing that happened then is that the guys in the band, the studio musicians, started talking about Jeff. I was starting to do some studio work then too.
Right.
So I went to Universal one morning working for Bobby Helfer, and I'm just, I'm in the vestibule on a 10, having coffee with the guys. And I just hearing guys say, Jesus Christ, you got to hear Joe's son. We did this album with Jack Doherty. I mean, this kid is, going to be something else and this and that. And overnight, before you know it, the the answering service, for musicians. Marion Klein especially, they started calling Jeff.
Wow. Just like that overnight.
Just like that, man. Going to a Jack Doherty. No, and I'm saying this for drummers out there, that he's playing at a park for a Halloween dance. You never know. The moral of the story is, give it your best shot every time you work, because you never know who's in the audience. You never know who's out there. He just went to play a little gig at the park.
Yeah.
And then the other cute story about this is right around that same time, we're a tight family. So, I'm doing the Glenn Campbell show, CBS Studio Center on
Right.
Fairfax. And it was summertime. Jeff was out of school. And I says, Dad, can I come with you? I said, yeah, come on with me. And I knew I was taking a chance. I said, Jesus, maybe I'm goofing, So I take Jeff with me.
Yeah.
And we're downstairs, we're piped in. The music is piped in upstairs in the studio.
Okay.
We're down in the studio downstairs. And I told Jeff, I said, okay, you sit over in the corner there. And I got a glass cage around me. I'm playing percussion,
Right.
so the percussion won't leak into the strings, Marty Page is the conductor. David Page was there this day that I brought Jeff, because his dad wanted him around just to get practice. He'd tell the piano player, let my son play on this cue, just to get experience.
Sure.
And then when we record, of course, you'll do it, So I brought Jeff, and I says, look, when that red light goes on, don't you even move. Don't make a noise on the stool. And if you're at a stand, stand. So during the rehearsal, Red Mandel, who was the contractor, comes over and says to me, who's that kid over there in the corner? I said, that's my son. I says, summer, he wasn't doing it. He wanted to know if he could come, And it's a rehearsal. I figured it'd be okay. Red says, no, you don't bring kids in here, man. This is a studio thing. We may have to record all of a sudden, I said, well, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. I said, but, can he stay? I don't want to, during the lunch hour, go way back to the valley and come back again. He said, yeah, but don't do it again. So, and Paul Humphrey, not Ralph Humphrey, Paul Humphrey was the drummer. Gene Cipriano, Pete Chrisley, Chuck Berghofer. This was the band, right? So we're taking I introduced, on one of the tens, I introduced Jeff to David Page. So, during the tens, they were hanging out. Now it's lunchtime. And I says, come on, Jeff, we're going to go get some lunch. He goes, Dad, do you mind? David Page wants me to go to lunch with him. I said, no, go ahead, So we go to lunch. We come back in the room, and there's Jeff and David Page jamming, just the two of them.
Yeah.
And Paul Humphrey, who the fuck is, who's, I said, that's my son. He said, that's your kid? He said, holy Christ, and all the musicians are coming in, Yeah. Now, meanwhile, because this is before the Jack Doherty thing, mind you. Well, anyways, David Page, everybody, they did their thing. They did the Hollywood Bowl, they were playing around town.
Right.
And meanwhile, they met Dave Hungate, the bass player, the original bass player in Toto,
Right.
And David Page is working with him. They're doing some, studio work, record dates. And Hungate is Sonny and Cher's bass player.
Oh.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So David tells Hungate about Jeff. So they do what in those days they hire Jeff to do some demo sessions,
People are making a living.
I think, $25 a tune,
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what, I got to go back a little bit again, one more time. When Jeff was in junior high school, Milliken Junior High in the North Valley,
Right.
when he came home from school, he had to walk by an electronics store on Burbank Boulevard. And the guy had a recording studio in there. No, it was Grant High, I'm sorry, Grant High School. Jeff used to walk home. Well, I don't know how kids talk. The guy heard about Jeff. So he hired Jeff to do demos.
Oh, coming home from high school.
Coming home from high school.
Wow.
After school, Jeff says, I'll be a little late. I got, what's his name, call me, and I'm going to do a couple of tunes for him. And the guy would pay him $25 a tune.
Wow.
And they had no clicks in those days, just straight ahead. So, Jeff had some experience in high school recording, quite a bit. I mean, he was doing quite a few, man, a couple days a week. So anyways, Hungate takes a liking to Jeff, and Sonny and Cher, Willie Arnellis, great drummer. Willie's, left Sonny, and David says, Jeff, let's, what do you think? You want to audition for Sonny and Cher? So, so I take them to Cher's house, Sonny and now meanwhile, I've been working for them at Gold Star, playing percussion, Right. So they know me a little bit too, So I take Jeff to their house on Sunset Boulevard in Beverly Hills. He goes in. Dennis Pregnolato is the manager, And I drop him off. I wait in the car. He comes out. I got the gig. I said, what? He says, I got the gig. They want me to do it. I said, Jeff, you realize Sonny and Cher? Holy Christ, So.
All in high school.
All in high school.
Wow.
So he comes home one day. He goes, I got a call. I'm going on the road with Sonny and Cher. I said, oh, yeah? I said, when? He says, starts January. I go out. I says, I said, you're not going anywhere. I said, you're finishing high school. I never graduated high school. God damn it, my kids are going to finish high school. You're going to school. And you're going to finish. I said, I don't care if you don't want to go to college, but they'll just have to get somebody else, but you're going to finish high school. Just as that, I'm going on the road. I'm going. I don't care what you say, I'm going. Now, what do? I know just how he feels, I mean, a chance of a lifetime, So I'm talking with my wife, we're in bed talking, and my wife says, I got an idea. So my wife goes to the principal. She went to the principal. And now, meanwhile, my wife always got involved in school activities at the school. So in junior high school, she was the head of a magazine drive. And she raised $35,000 back then. Can you imagine? They built a library room.
Oh, wow.
So the principal at Grant High approached her, heard about it, and approached her to be in charge of a magazine drive, right? And she did. Well, she goes to see him about Jeff, and he goes, well, he says, let's check his record. Let me see, was he a good student, was he a pain in the ass, So they look at his record, and he goes, oh my God. He says, he's got way more credits than he needs to graduate. I mean, he played all the school orchestras, went around town playing with the brass and woodwind percussion, quintet, groups, played all the musicals at the school, has the art department because he had all honors in art,
I remember the art stuff, yeah.
He got a D in music. He got a D in music. Would you believe that? And anyways, no, not at Grant. Previously, like
Right.
I don't know, in the
Middle school or something.
yeah, something like that. But because he was clapping on 2 and 4, and the teacher says, "No, you clap on 1 and 3." She gave him a D. So, principal said, and he was a sweet guy. Well, I'm saying that because, but he was.
Sure.
And he says, "I'll tell you what." He says, "Just have him come back when they graduate. Maybe he'll be back then, and just
Off the road.
don't spread the word. Don't it's legal, but don't go bragging about it. Like don't make a
Sure.
big thing about it." So sure enough, Jeff went on the road with Sonny and Cher. Now I got to finish the story this way.
Sure.
Sonny says they're getting real tight now, right? They're on the road, and he gets Sonny and Cher. They get the Sonny and Cher TV show.
Right.
They're going to start the Sonny and Cher show. So, and of course, in those days, you go to the studio guys, do the show. Drummers, everybody, Well, Sonny went to Jimmy Dean, the conductor. Was it Jimmy Dean? I think it's something Dean.
Conductor of the show.
Yeah,
TV show.
the musical director.
Oh, okay.
He's from Canada. And Sonny went up to him and says, "I'd like to have my own drummer do the show." And he says, "You gotta be kidding. We can't have, you know what, live TV, this is a live TV show, for Christ's sakes, You don't use, the guys in your band. You gotta have a studio guy that can sight read, I mean, there's a lot of music. The opera section and all that, legit snare drum playing." He says, "Try him once. If he doesn't make it, then okay. We'll get a studio guy." So Jeff goes, he does the show, he gets the show.
Wow.
They loved him.
Wow. Unreal.
And I told him, I said, "Look, don't get uptight. If there's something," because Alan Estes was the
I
percussionist.
remember.
I says, "Go to Alan. If there's a figure, you can't figure out, Alan will help you, So Sure enough, there were a couple of times where Alan helped, and he did enough of them. Now, check this out. Guess who the contractor was on this show?
Frank Cap.
No. No. Oh, Frank Cap? Jeff used him as a sub. Frank, he won't mind this story.
Hell no.
Jeff would do the pre-record. Then the next day, you go in and film, and you make believe that you're playing, right? You don't play. So Jeff was starting to get real busy doing record dates. Mm-hmm. So he got hung up one day, and he tells the contractor, Red Mandel, I can't make it, next week, such and such a day. Right. And Red says, no problem, I'll get Frank Cap sub for you. But Red Mandel, you know who he is? He's the contractor that told me, don't bring your son around here anymore. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow. Goes around, comes around. Wow.
Right? It's a wild story.
That's great. That's a great story.
And I told Red, I saw Red, can you imagine you told him not to come, you told me not to bring him around, here you are, you're hiring him with David Page and everybody.
Oh, man. That's funny stuff.
Yeah, that's the story. Then there was one other story.
Wait, this shuts down. Okay.
There's one final story.
God, it was great, Joe.
I was working at Universal one day, and Larry Carlton came up to me,
Right.
And Larry says, hey, Joe, I think you ought to talk to Jeff. And, Jeff and Larry were very, very tight, I said, what's my, I don't know, we were doing a Barbra Streisand session, and he left. Mm-hmm. Barbra Streisand, oh, okay. Okay. So I saw Mike, piano player, great piano player in town. He was one of the piano players on Mike Melvoin. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey Mike, Mike came up to me. Same session, maybe a different day. Mike came up to me and says, hey, I worked with your son the other night, with Barbra Streisand. I said, oh, yeah? Oh, wow. I says, how did it go? He goes, yeah, it was great. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting for him to say something negative too,
Right.
He says, the only thing, he says, something really funny happened. I says, what's that? He goes, well, it got to be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We're doing this tune over and over and over. And according, you know how those sessions go. Sometimes the very first take is the best one. Right. First or second take, right? Sure. You've heard of stories like that. But it got to be about 3 in the morning, and Jeff said he had to go make a phone call. Mm-hmm. And he never came back. We're all waiting for him. Mm-hmm. Phil Ramone, I think, was the producer. Barbara, they're all in the studio,
Wow.
And he didn't come back. Well, they come back the next day for the session. And Phil Marone and Barbara say, what happened to you last night? You said you're going to make a phone call.
Right.
And Jeff says, yeah, I did. I just got off the phone. He had to come up with something. Yeah, he just got so, pissed that he just went home. He couldn't handle it anymore. He didn't give a shit what was going to happen. Right, he just went home. So when they said, where were you? He says, I just got off the phone. Isn't that funny?
That's a great line, Joe. I got to use that one myself.
That was funny, man. So I felt a lot better because, I respect Larry Carlton so much, man. In fact, Larry and I go way back. Some of my first casuals. Yeah. Larry was in college, Larry Carlton,
right.
In the south, part of L.A., Orange County or down that way,
Right.
He was a kid in school with a big pompadour haircut. He looked like a country,
Yeah, I remember that.
He looked like Glenn Campbell, But we did a bunch of dates with Eddie Robertson, bass player from Burbank.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, some of my first gigs were with Larry Carlton.
So you and Jeff played on quite a few albums, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah. We did. Well, of course, one of my proudest moments was me, well, Jeff, Mike, and Steve, and myself, we did the Greek theater with Boss Gags.
Oh, wow.
All four of
Yeah,
us.
must
Yeah.
be great.
And then I played with them in Connecticut, my hometown.
Uh-huh.
You know, they invited me up on stage to play with them. You know,
Oh,
when they
that's
went on
great.
the road. Yeah.
Right on.
And then you know, I overdubbed some percussion on the
Mhm.
Silk Degrees album. You know, and that's when I first met Paul Jameson,
Oh, yeah.
Jeff's roadie. You
Right.
know, he had a
Mid-70s.
he had a big suitcases, not suitcases, but trunks loaded with Radio King snare drums.
I know, I used to
He
do
didn't
those.
even know they were Radio King snare drums, man. I had to tell them. He used to go from one hawk shop to another, picking up snare, used equipment.
Yeah.
I said, "Do you realize these are Radio King snare drums, man? Solid maple shells." He had a whole trunk full of them,
Yeah,
man.
he didn't know. Yeah.
But
Do you remember bringing Jeff into the store at a young age, or?
yeah, man, oh God, way back then, of course, he come in here with his, freaking out. He was, like you said, he was about 13, 14. But then later on, when he started making a name for himself and he would come in, he did some stuff here with Fred Beto, for advertising
Right.
for Fred, But yeah, oh yeah, man, we used to come in. I'd go to the Union. I'd go with him.
Mhm.
We used to go to the Union
Right.
because you had to pick up your checks at the Union.
Right.
And I was in one line because it was a busy day. This is another cute story.
Mhm.
Real busy day. So I'm in this line, Jeff is over here, right? And Tommy Tedesco, this great guitar player, he's in front of me, right? So he and Jeff get to the counter at the same time. And they ask for their checks. And the girl comes out. Tedesco's got a pile of checks like this, And Jeff's got, a little pile of checks. He's just getting going, right?
Yeah.
But he had a few checks. So Tedesco looks over at him. Now there's, maybe 15, 20 guys in line listening to Tedesco go, yells over to him. He goes, "I'll match you for the first check." In other words, you look at the number, the amount of the check, right?
Right.
You match each other,
Mhm.
And who's got the highest check grabs the other guy's check,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or it could go the other way, the low end, So Tedesco looks at Jeff, he's smart-ass little kid, huh? I think you're a big-time studio guy. He goes, "I'll match you for your top check." And Jeff says, "What?" He says, "I'll match you for your check." Jeff looks, he doesn't know, he's embarrassed. He doesn't know what to do.
Right.
So he goes, "Okay." So Jeff's got a check for, $325, whatever it was, and Tedesco's got a check for, him, double scale, $800 or something.
Right.
I went, he grabs his check. I got so pissed off at him. I said, young kid like that, you pull a trick like that. Now, it wasn't a trick, but what does he know about?
Sure.
But Jeff just wanted to, okay, I got to be one of the guys,
Like a lot.
You know what I mean? Tedesco would, like one time with Amo Richards, Celeste was having a baby,
Right.
and Tedesco says, "I'll bet you, it's like matching coins, right?"
Right.
He says, "I'll bet you what kind of baby Celeste is going to have." And Amo says, "Okay." Well, Tedesco says, "She's going to have a girl." And Amos said, "No, that's what I want her to have. I'll let me say it." He said, "Okay, I'll say she's going to have a boy." And of course, Amo won. But he would bet on anything,
Yeah.
Tedesco,
That's what he was.
But yeah, like I did, Olivia Newton-John, and I did a bunch of stuff with Jeff. And then I played on most of their albums until Simon came along, But I worked on all their albums, Jake to the Bone, all those tunes. And then we did a lot of TV film together and movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we did. Marty Page was conducting and writing for a show at Universal called Ironside. Remember Ironside?
Yes.
Yeah. Every few years there would be a different producer, different composer, but this few years it was, Marty's guy, So we did Ironside and a couple other shows. And Jeff was on drums, I was on percussion.
Wow.
Yeah. But he looked at me one day, he's in a drum booth, Shelly Man drum booth, right, you know. And he looked at me and he went like this, you know, because all he did, you know, was roll on a cymbal, you know.
Oh, right.
You know,
Just
just nothing to play at all, you know, and keep light time, you know.
Right.
But as it worked out, he started getting real busy, you know,
You pick and choose then.
in the studios, you know, the record date scene, you know, and he didn't have to do it anymore.
Right.
And then at that time, that you know, they called it TV film, you know, serials.
Right.
It started dying out, you know, and it went to like garage music composers started writing for those shows.
Got it.
You know, it's hardly done anymore at all, you know, with live.
Sure.
The only thing I think happening live is like The Simpsons
Right.
and some of the shows Amo's doing. You know, I don't know the name of them.
Mm-hmm.
But then James Newton Howard, you know, was starting to get busy in, you know, movies, and he hired Jeff to do drum tracks, you know. And I Jeff wouldn't say too much, but I've heard from other people, Pat Williams and, you know, composers like that Jeff would play, you know, on the main titles, you know, of their tunes. And then, of course, he's on a bunch of gold records. What's his name? The song he wrote about L.A., his whole family is, they're all musicians. Lionel Newman.
Oh, yeah, Randy.
Randy Newman.
Right.
I Love L.A., is
Right,
that?
That's it.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
Jeff on drums, I
Oh,
think.
really? I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah, that's Jeff on drums.
I know.
He used Jeff on drums a lot and on his movies too.
Wow.
Yeah, which I didn't know about, but
I didn't know
yeah,
that either.
I found this out later on.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, so
any other little thing that comes to mind?
that's about it,
So,
man.
that was great.
We covered a lot of ground,
We
I
did.
think.
I think it needed to be done.
You know, yeah, I think
mean, I've always read a few things about Jeff, but I never really heard it from the horse's mouth, as they say.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
There's another thing about Jeff. You know, he was quite an artist.
right.
He's
I've seen that.
we have some great drawings of his.
Mhm.
Real briefly, again, when I was teaching at Lee Pack's drum shop, I had a student whose mom was a art teacher.
Mhm.
You know, so I asked her once, I said, gee, my son comes home with these drawings, you know. I'm flabbergasted. I mean, there's Civil War scenes, you know, they look so real.
Yeah.
She said, yeah, I'd like to see them. So I brought him in and she said, get this kid to an art school, art teacher. You got to do it, she said.
Yeah.
And he was only like 12 at the time.
Right, right.
You know, so he did the cover to my book. He did Amo
I've
Richards,
seen them.
his illustrations, you know, that cover,
Right.
the guy hitting the gong, you know.
Playing music in Mommy's kitchen.
Yeah,
That was-
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other book, there's a big, thick brown book. It's about orchestration, I think,
Oh.
a hardcover, I think. And there's a picture of a, you know, Guy Bear
Yeah.
hitting.
World percussion.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's Jeff.
That's Jeff's
Oh, I didn't
drawing.
know that.
Yeah. Yeah, he was,
All right.
he was, and then when Jeff passed away, I went with his wife to the warehouse, you know, to
Mhm.
his cartage company,
Mhm.
the drum doctor.
Right.
And man, there were two pile of drum heads,
Mhm.
5 feet up, you know, stacked, and all, you know, when he was bored,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
or he, you know, was tacit on something, he'd draw on his drum heads,
Oh,
you know,
really?
yeah, and there was some crazy stuff, you
Yeah.
know, but there was some really hip stuff, and his wife took him to Florida, put him in a warehouse.
Oh, sure. Say them all.
Yeah, she saved them all.
Excellent.
I couldn't even get one
Does she still have all his equipment and everything?
in Florida.
In Florida?
Yeah, that's what I understand. You know, I heard from who's the great drum Brady Drums in Australia.
Right.
He claims that Jeff was going to go over to Brady Drums,
Mm-hmm.
and he left a set of drums here. You know, I never saw Jeff play, you know,
Right, yeah.
Brady drums.
Maybe a snare
I
drum.
never saw them, but maybe, you know. And I never saw the drums, but he claims he, you know,
Mhm.
Jeff had Brady
I
drums.
remember when Jeff came in when Chico Guerrero passed. Bob handled all of Chico's equipment. I remember Jeff coming in and buying Chico's timbales.
You're kidding.
The Humberto Morales.
I didn't know
timbales. I
that.
remember that
Really?
when he was in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Wow.
Around 89, 90, somewhere.
Could
in there.
be. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I was just curious.
Yeah. I don't know where,
All that stuff.
because they don't even know where the Brady drums are.
Yeah.
You know, they have no idea. They made some phone calls to Susan, his wife. You know, she's remarried,
How's
of
his
course.
kids, by the way?
They're good.
Yeah.
They're good. Miles was living with my son Mike.
Uh-huh.
You know, Mike has a friend in North Hollywood that's got a Devonshire Recording Studios.
Right.
Gary Falcone owns it, and he hired Miles. Was going to train him to, you know, for engineering, you know, but at first he was doing setup work, you know.
Right.
But he decided to go back to Florida for a while.
Oh, he did.
But he's coming back. But he was living with Mike.
All right on.
Yeah. He was helping out at Mike's, you know. His other brother went back to Florida, went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
And Nico, the youngest one, was going to school in Connecticut, a private school, but decided, you know, he didn't enjoy it. But he came out here, went to USC Film School
Oh, wow.
1 year, yeah. Now he's back in Florida, and then that's what he wants to do. He wants to
Just do film.
do film work.
Right on.
So they're in
All
good
right.
shape.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, well, thank you.
Anytime,
Just wanted to
man.
get
Yeah,
on
this-
tape.
That gives you.
Your
I think
family's always
we
been close to this store, and I just want to
right.
make sure.
We covered quite a bit.
Yes, you did.
We went way back, man.
Yeah.
From the guy downstairs hitting on the pipes
Yeah, exactly. Pissed off. Thank you, Joe.
to Red Mandel. Don't bring that kid around here anymore.